So today I'm going to talk about how positive focus is absolutely not a spiritual bypass. And I'm going to define what I mean by positive focus and what I mean by spiritual bypass. So there's this idea in spirituality that if you think positively or positive focus at the exclusion of shadow work is bypassing reality, right? I'm explaining away or avoiding reality, which could very well be true if that's how you are using positive focus. If your reality is that you are in an abusive situation and you're saying, oh, everything's in alignment and everybody's doing the best they can, that's a spiritual bypass, right? You may or may not be acknowledging a reality that, if acknowledged and accepted, could lead to a transfiguration of the situation, or a decision will become available to you to leave the situation. A spiritual bypass could be, okay, the reality is that I feel a lot of grief around something that has occurred in my life. And a bypass would be, oh, everybody, we live forever. Somebody may have died in my life, but we live forever. So there's no point in being sad, right? The spiritual ego can come in and start using its spiritual logic to kind of override the natural emotion that, yes, is within you, right? But at the same time, ask yourself this question: does my spiritual ego and my spiritual logic and the concepts that I've learned, do they cancel out experience? That's a spiritual bypass, because the truth is that, yes, we are human and we do feel grief when we lose things. And eventually you get to a place where the grief is it's almost like it's almost like bliss. There's a fine line between negative emotion and bliss when you really learn how to stop escaping reality, because reality is all made of light. And when you really surrender into an emotion, whether it's grief, even a physical sensation, if you stopped resisting it 100% and you went completely into it, you would feel bliss. So I have some teenage girls over for dinner with their family, so they're laughing, which I love the sound of teenage laughter. It's cute. So when you really feel something, you realize that reality is bliss. You are occupying the moment and you realize that reality is actually bliss. If you go into an emotion right now and you just almost like went completely into it, as if that was the only thing in the universe that existed, you were completely absorbed in it, it feels like the light starts to shine through it, like literally, like, oh, the light starts to shine through it, because the only thing obscuring the light was your lack of attention, was your lack of giving into it, seeing it for what it really is, which is a moment of separation, which is trying to complete itself. So a bypass would be trying to snuff out or trying to redirect your mind and not allow a moment to complete itself, right? Whether it's a moment of grief, a moment of sadness, a moment of rage, right? That's a big one. People are incredibly conditioned to not accept anger as a normal part of human reality, when the element of fire is essential in our life, to make us passionate about things, to move things, right? The molten layer of the earth like kind of makes the world go round. In addition to all the other forces and elements, all the elements work together. There are volcanoes in nature. There are Zen masters who smack their students with, bamboo sticks every once in a while. Being chronically angry is a pattern, but sometimes anger is intelligence. Sometimes You know, sometimes something is happening, a situation, and your energy turns up really quick, and maybe you diffuse a dangerous situation, right? You let somebody know, oh, hell no, this is not happening. The only way to diffuse a situation is not necessarily to radiate light, and you know, that's one way, and that is for sure real. I've experienced that, so I know it's real, but I've also experienced times when my anger was intelligent, and I've also experienced my spiritual ego trying to cancel it and causing what seemed like outbursts that didn't follow logically with the rest of my personality. When we repress energy, this is just like the way energy works. When you repress energy, when you repress emotion, it will find a way out. It will find a way to express. It just will. So if you repress your anger and you pretend like you don't hold any grudges and you pretend like nobody bothers you, what will happen is it'll come out in snarky comments. It'll come out in maybe aggressive mothering behavior. It will come out, right? People are always communicating their true emotions, whether they think they're hiding them or not. So allowing yourself not to bypass that is so important. But my message today is about positive focus and how it is absolutely not a bypass, because first of all, what I mean by positive focus is two things, and I will do another video on occupying the mind. But positive focus, the way that I have used it as a tool in my spiritual tool belt, is bathing in and saturating myself in high frequencies, whether it's my higher self, connecting with my higher self in meditation, which is using a verbal cue like higher love and just bathing in heart energy. That's my meditation. That's how I meditate at this point. Whether it's chanting in my car, whether it's choosing the music that I'm going to listen to. You know, I used to say, well, every kind of music has its benefit, and it's good to move energy and it's good to release. And I still agree with that. But what I also have seen is that I'm trending towards every single thing, every nutriment, like the Buddha would say, everything I digest is of a high quality, in the sense that doesn't mean that it excludes anything, but it's a heart feeling. That's where I spend most of my attention. It's most of my attention. I will not pay attention to music with negative messaging, negative messages about women. I just won't. And I used to not care. I used to just kind of like cancel that part out and like enjoy the rest of it, which I think is fine, you know, and that's not a bad quality to have either, to be able to absorb the good out of something. But I simply find myself, for whatever reason, being more intentional about what I allow into my experience. So bathing in higher frequencies. The ironic thing about putting 99% of your attention or 95% of your attention on light work is that that is what does the shadow work. Because if you haven't had a spiritual awakening where you have truly disidentified from form and disidentified from the ego, if that isn't your experience, the only way you can tell the difference between your fear-based conditioning and the qualities of your true nature, which are joy, love, peace, adventure, inspiration, appreciation, awe, wonder. If you are not naturally feeling the dimension of yourself that is already in those vibrations, one way to do that is to tune into your heart. If you're not feeling that, the only way to create contrast between your familiar conditioned personality and your true nature is to purposely saturate yourself in the energy of your true nature, so that when you're not those things, it will stick out to you in a very strong way, and you can actually decide, like, no, I'm not going to let that energy puppet me around. I feel a snarky energy coming up that could lead to a comment. I feel that old addiction to look for, you know, those web pages or those people online that piss me off and trigger me. You know, I highly recommend acquiring a sort of discipline where you decide. A decision is so incredibly powerful. Making a decision to say, I'm not going to go to that familiar, mediocre behavior of literally looking for the food that my conditioning wants to eat, whether it's a person's Instagram page that pisses me off or an email blast of conspiracy theories. And I'm not saying that all of those theories are untrue, but what's the energy of it? What are you choosing every day to bathe in? Are you choosing to slip back into your familiar energies? The only reason that we do that is because we haven't found something greater. Because when you find something greater, it feels so shitty and lame. I mean, to put it frankly, to slip back in there. And this is not about abusing ourselves, or this is about the balance between severity and mercy, between being real, having a wand of light or a sword of light to have discernment, and having unconditional love at the same time. So when your old personality energies arise, in that instant, you feel love. You don't disregard anything, but you see it for what it is, and you don't let it puppet you around, right? What do you want? What do you want puppeting your body around? Do you want it to be God, or do you want it to be an obscuration of God, which is the fear-based conditioning? It's up to you. It's really up to you. But the best way to be able to actually have the experience of having a choice of who you are in this world is that you have to become familiar. You have to become familiar with the frequencies of your true nature. So how do you do that? Pick a frequency, bathe in it. Maybe if you're sensitive to music, choose a song to go with it. I love Remco Arendt's Luminous and Ultraviolet. Practice frequencies, practice anchoring frequencies. Put a frequency in every chakra and anchor it. Anchor the feeling of stability. Anchor the feeling of feeling your central channel and feeling your root chakra at the same time, and feeling love at the same time. Practice these things so that then when you go into confusion and chaos and spinning, you're like, oh no, that's just me slipping back. And then boom, you're back. So many people, especially empaths, spin because they believe very deeply that they are completely at the mercy of their environment. But the more empathic you are, the more intention you have to have, to be honest with you. Especially if you live in the Western world, especially if you have a lot of involvement with different activities, with different humans. If you are an empath in unity consciousness and you're living in the Himalayas, or you're living in Tirunavaram, in Arunachala, right? Like Ramana Maharshi. What's around you, your devotees, your cow, and a mountain, that's probably going to feel pretty good. You probably feel the pain of the world as well. But if you're in the Western world and you are a person who is spending time with your family of origin, who's really like deeply cutting those deep psychological karmic ties, and navigating business and all of these Western things, but in an embodied enlightenment, well, you might want to be intentional about what you focus on so that you're not being bombarded, or so that you don't feel like you're being bombarded by information, and use your gift, your God-given gift of tuning. And what happens is that what at first feels like discipline ends up, it's like the old personality just fizzles out because you haven't given it attention. That's what really, so positive focus is not a spiritual bypass, because you're not withdrawing your attention from it as it arises, but you're over and over and over again choosing love. You're choosing, when you get in your car, you're going to listen to something that opens your heart. You're choosing to open your awareness and be in the awe of reality. You're choosing. And just like you unconsciously chose anything that would help you survive, now you're choosing your real self. And so that survival personality will diminish greatly. It will stay to a certain extent because we're still part animal and we still, parts of us want to survive to varying degrees. Some people who find out their true nature, their sense of survival pretty much disappears. Other people, less so, like I said, masters like Babaji, they live on this earth for thousands of years because they deeply love and care about blessing this world with guidance and energy. And some people get reabsorbed back into the source, and everybody's different. Don't put images on yourself about what being spiritual, what embodying enlightenment, about what being a master means. That's in your heart. Nobody can tell you what's in your heart. So positive focus is the key to freedom, actually, because it helps you become aware of the shadow frequencies so that you no longer choose them, so that you have free will. If you don't have, if your conditioning is puppeting your body in this world, you have no free will. Period. And I don't care about the philosophical discussion about ultimately, do we ultimately have free will? Was it predetermined that I would find out who I was? My answer to that is, who cares? Live the journey, exercise choice, be grounded, right? Be grounded in it. And sure, you might like zoom out into very mystical states where all of, things that make sense to your mind are completely irrelevant, but we're here now, and this age that we're in is about being spirit in the human experience, which includes as well occupying the mind. Going beyond the mind is step one. Going beyond the mind, realizing that there's a dimension beyond the mind, is literally step one. It's actually more difficult, right? Because awareness is always there. Whether awareness is aware of itself is another question. But then you're still here, right? And if your mind is still creating form, well, you might want to occupy your mind, right? People tend to sit right behind the mind and right behind their experience, where the mind keeps creating form. The mind creates form. And what's so interesting is that if you were to really just come occupy yourself, which is somatically feels like you are kind of pressing yourself into the mind, like you're pressing yourself in. If you literally feel that, press yourself in to the mind, what you'll find is those negative thoughts will go away, because when you're not occupying the mind, the only wheel that can turn is the wheel of programming. But once you merge with the wheel, it stops. And there you can say, is it true that my parents don't support me? Maybe they do in their own way. Is it true that life is terrible to me? Is it true? Like all of these thoughts that are running when you are behind yourself, when you are not occupying your mind, they kind of automatically come into inquiry, where you can write a new story. Like you can narrate a new story, and it's not even a new story, it's just the truer, more enlightened aspects of the story that you were not giving your attention to. So for example, I know that a lot of people as children, they grow up being very defensive, and they develop a kind of dissatisfaction as a tool to keep things away from them, to keep joy away from them. We put joy in our shadow, and it gets replaced with dissatisfaction, because if I don't explain how shitty my life is, then it's never going to change, right? I'm angry and I'm enraged at my parents for doing this to me, so I'm just going to talk about it all the time, because I unconsciously think that God will save me if I make it clear how shitty my life is. So that's just an immature reaction that was created out of feeling like a victim, right? But once you merge with the mind, it's like you're looking through your spiritual eyes now. You're not looking through the glasses of your conditioning. You're looking through your true vision, and you're like, wait a minute. This moment is amazing. Not even thinking about it. This moment is amazing. Oh, the lights, the colors, the the light matrix of this reality, the vividness of this reality, the perfection of this reality, the heart, the love that you feel for everybody that's ever been in your life, because you realize like that they really have always been doing their best, and in their own way, a lot of people actually mean well in their attempt to interact with you, but it just comes out in a twisted way because they have so much repressed emotion, right? And so instead of being behind reality and looking at it through the mind of our conditioning, we can occupy the mind and say like, wow, I really appreciate everything I've lived. I appreciate who I am. I appreciate my family and why I chose them, because you did choose them. You chose the energy that you incarnate. You chose the astrological energy. You know, people look at astrology and all those individuation tools as like, oh, how did God design me? It's like, you are God and you chose these energies for an experience. You chose to master something, so you calibrated to energies in your family. It's not a punishment. It's not because you did something wrong. It's because you have the strength to stop the momentum. So when you realize who you are, you don't feel like a victim anymore. And really, like I've said many times, that staying in observation and just observing, going beyond the mind, but then watching the mind just blah, 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 blah. If your mind is just always talking in any kind of stressful way, whether it's minor or great, and by the way, you might not know it's stressful unless you do what I say, like, or what other people say, which is like, saturate yourself in higher frequencies. You might be so used to stress that you will not even know that all of your machinations of your mind that might feel inspired to you are actually very stressful and draining. When you occupy that, right, if that's still going on, you're behind your mind. You're not occupying the mind. When you occupy the mind, two things happen. It gets quieter, and the thoughts that occur to you are actually more positive. You actually realize yourself as the narrator of reality. So positive focus and occupying the mind are not spiritual bypass. We are being, and we are the creator. We are the creator. Do you want to just stay in one dimension of reality and be and watch the creator part of you just create based on its understanding of survival? Or do you want to merge with your mind, occupy the mind, and turn that wheel and start to create from a place of realization and from a place of love? I mean, it's up to you. There's no right or wrong. So that's my message for today. It's not a spiritual bypass to be positive, to saturate yourself in positive energy. It's one thing to try to think positive thoughts while you're still in negative energy. That's a misunderstanding of how it works. When you discharge the energy by being present with it, now you have the bandwidth to actually have a positive thought, right? You realize the thought. You're in a dimension where the thought already exists and where you're actually feeling like you're narrating an inspired reality. That's the work, because you can't, it's true, you can only go as high as you go low, right? But if you're right here, if you're so familiar with your conditioning, like, you're not going to be very aware of your shadows. So you have to create the contrast in order to become aware. You have to stretch yourself. You have to spend time feeling love, inspiration. You have to choose. You have to be intentional for a while until it becomes natural, so that you become aware of these things over here, so that you can accept them, and so that they no longer puppet you around in your reality. So that's my message for today. I hope you have a beautiful day.